Now, something I want to address, and again, it comes to a really interesting thing that I was watching today. And again, when I hear the word conspiracy, there are so many people who chase after conspiracies. And the problem is, sometimes they become their own pursuit, and people become so locked into trying to figure out the little nuances of things that they completely kind of miss the forest for the trees. But when you start to look at things that would be considered as conspiracies that some people look at and are really deeply troubling to them, you just go, I don't know what you're expecting, but man, the stuff that you think that you're seeing, and it may very well be that most all of what they're seeing is really genuine, there's not a thing you can do about it. And there really needs to be that recognition and that understanding. So as I'm watching this thing, it was in one particular part, it was looking at a few different aspects of the same thing. Are there things that are being done in warfare that this world doesn't know because it's more clandestine, it's done behind the scenes, and only some people know about it? And then they started to go into this idea that in order to be so targeted in the attacks that happen on some people, you have to have technology to know where they are, to do what they can do, and all the rest of it. And they said, does that really actually exist? Does that kind of technology actually exist? And so in this case, the guy who's asking all of these questions has a friend who really tries to stay very much off the grid. And as he explained it, don't do social media, we don't do this, we don't do that. And then this guy who's asking all the questions gets another friend of his and says, what can we find out about my friend who thinks that he's really pretty much flying under the radar? And within a few days, they're basically able to tell this guy all kinds of things about himself, and he thinks all the while he's very much anonymous. Now, with the right technology, I can tell you everything about you, and if I wanted to target you, I could do anything that I wanted to. I know where your kids go to school, all that stuff. And it wasn't just following around, it was all technology. So people will see that kind of stuff, and it can throw some people into absolute total panic. So if it's that, or if it's, well, what about what's happening in the Middle East? What about what's happening in our politics? What about what's happening with this technology or that technology? And people jump from one thing to the next. There are all the worries about extraterrestrials, and there's all concerns about so many different things. People get themselves so unbelievably consumed. And this is what I was talking about just not all that long ago, about how is it that you try to keep a level head about yourself, because there's so many things that people are so troubled about. And I'll be honest with you, when I watch this thing today, it is really one of those things where you just go, the technology that we know about, and whatever it is that we know about, what's actually in the development is so far beyond anything that we have, it's almost unimaginable. So I do know this. I know it would be very, very easy, and I know I've made mention of this on more than one occasion, but the technology that's available to pretty much anybody who wants it, not even just, to really high level people, the consumer grade type of stuff, you could make videos of me sitting just like I am with my voice and my likeness, and have me absolutely refute everything that I've ever believed. You could do that. I mean, people are good with that type of stuff. They could make that happen tomorrow. So if you don't have a trained ear or a trained eye or whatever else, you could make that kind of consumer grade, and most people would just watch it, or maybe they're not watching it very closely, and they'll just hear everything and they'll think, wow, Chris just went completely nuts, and a believer for 40 years turned on a dime and now he believes all this other stuff. So it's when you start to realize that our world is so put into this position of things that are beyond our control, and there's nothing that we can do about it, it really does lend itself to all kinds of fear and all kinds of anxiety and worry and trouble. And there's really ultimately, at the end of it, what compounds that is that nothing can be done about it. Is that defeatist, or what is that? No, it's just a recognition of where we are. So it's not a lack of information, that if only people knew about this, we could stand up to it and do something about it. No, you couldn't. Again, because if that was the case, we would have the freedom to try to do something even on some scale here in this country. But other places in the world, the people have nowhere near that kind of power to stand up and be a voice of opposition. The governments would just wipe those people out. So when we see all these things taking place, we just have to say, how does the believer conduct themselves? Well, the believer should be able to look at this and say, the days are upon us, and we should be busy about saying, in the days that we have left, what would God have us to do, and what would our message be? How would we want to engage this culture to let them know that nothing that's taking place should surprise us? It may be shocking to the system, but ultimately it is very much for the here and now. And so what about the eternal? And this is where we'd have the opportunity to begin to use it as witness. And here's one passage that I really want to be able to focus on, because again, at the end of the day, when you read those kind of things or watch a program like I did, and you really do recognize that we live in a world that's so unique and different, it's never existed before. We do know from looking at the book of Revelation, since I believe it's a literal look at what's future to this world, but I see it taking shape in the world around us, that the population grows by the day. We're over 8 billion people on the planet. But even as the population expands, the ability to control an ever-increasing population is able to be done with a smaller and smaller group of people because of technology. That's precisely what I would expect to see as I read the book of Revelation. So when the devil steps onto the scene, which he will, I know that it will be very easy for him to do the things that he does, the Antichrist, for him to do the things that he does, because all of the apparatus is already going to be in place. He just kind of steps into something that's already tailor-made for him. But if that's the case, why would I be troubled? Because none of that could happen unless God says, now is the time. I will allow the infrastructure to be put in place, because at a time of my choosing, I'm going to allow him to step into it. So remember, it's God who's ultimately the one who is in control of the entirety of the timepiece. Look at the book of Titus with me, and let's look at what's said here, because this is again mindset. Chapter 2 of the book of Titus. Remember, Titus being one of the other pastors, in addition to Timothy, that Paul addresses with a letter about, here's what you should be paying attention to in the church. You're the overseers. Here's what your church should look like in its people. So that's covered in 1 Timothy, and it's covered here in Titus. 2 Timothy is a little bit more personal between Paul and Timothy. 1 Timothy and Titus are really more about church model, if you will, about church structure. So right here, and again, we're jumping right into context, but for sake of time, I'll just say, he's talking about, here's what the church should look like, here's the interaction between people, here's what your leadership structure, he's gone through all that stuff. Now he says in verse 11, "For here's what we know, the grace of God that brings salvation has, past tense, already appeared to all men." We know him as Jesus. So the one who could reconcile us to God, he's already appeared. So if that's the case, we know who he is, we know what he expects of us, we know what it is to be right before him, and we have our marching orders of what we're supposed to do. Live a life separate from the things of the world, not detached from it, because we want to reach the world, but we don't want to reflect the world. We don't want to be like they are. We want to give them something else. Says here, and here's what we're to do. And it teaches us, rather. So Jesus has appeared, and here's what we've been taught. That denying ungodliness and worldly lusts, we should live soberly, righteously, and godly in this present age. So, well, what about the technology? What about the conspiracies? What about the powerful people? What about this? What about that? Doesn't matter. We're not told any of those things. No matter what your society looks like, this is how you're supposed to conduct yourself. And look at that list of things. We're supposed to deny ungodliness and worldly lusts. We should live soberly, right-minded. We should also live righteously, acceptable as far as God is concerned, and godly in this present age. Make yourself an example. Let them know that there's something different about you. Looking at this. Looking for. Why would we be doing this? Well, because our focus and looking at is the blessed hope and the glorious appearing of our great God and Savior, Jesus Christ. There is the thing that keeps you stable. Now, some people would look at that and say that's referring to the second coming. Others would say that it's looking to the rapture. So without getting into a debate, I believe it's the rapture, but not even giving into the debate about second coming versus rapture, here's what we should be doing. Our focus should be the day when we are reconciled and see God face to face when we see God face to face in the person of Jesus. That should be the thing. That's the goal. That's what we look forward to. That is the end. That's the prize. Between here and now, he's already told Titus how it is that we're supposed to conduct ourselves. And it means a life that is known by separation from the world as far as what makes us tick, but very much engaged with the world, that we might reach out to it with the good news of the gospel, because our eyes are focused on the living hope. That's what's coming. That's what motivates us day by day. And it's what keeps us centered and keeps us from going crazy. Because again, that thing that I watched this morning and all the other stuff that I have, people send me stuff all the time. Did you see what this person is doing? Did you see what this technology is? And they're always sending me this stuff. And it exists. That's fine. It's there. I know that. I'm not surprised by it. I expect those things as we get closer to the return of the Lord. What do you do with those things, and how do they affect your day-to-day life is another matter entirely. And it's why I can see the unsaved world who sees that stuff, like this guy and the people that he was interviewing. None of those people know the Lord, and you could see there's a real tension in them. Because it's like, oh my gosh, look at what can be done by a few people if they have nefarious, intentions and all the rest. But they could do some very terrible things. We would look at that and say, you have no idea where this is ultimately going. This is just setting the groundwork, and it's getting everything in place for a guy who you don't even have the slightest knowledge of just how evil he's going to be and the things that he's going to be able to do. Well, why are you not freaked out? I have a living hope. The glorious appearing of my Lord, man, that keeps me settled. So whatever this stuff may be, or if it even runs me over, not going to be a shock to him, but my life here is very much temporal. We've already read that in Matthew. So the idea that, am I going to try to fight against this stuff, trying to save and preserve my own life? Or do I say, that's already known to him. My eternity is what matters here. And I wouldn't exchange anything for that. So having a settled mind and heart when we see all this stuff, because again, it's only going to get more as days go by. The world will become more and more hopeless, and man will be more and more helpless to do anything about it. The believer is empowered in ways that I don't know most people really fully grasp. To be able to walk through this life, though it can affect you day to day, to realize that this world is powerless over you in the eternal of things, is an enormous freedom to us. And it should be embraced by each of us. We shouldn't lose any sleep over this stuff. We should be able to say, I see it going around us. I should do anything I can to kind of keep myself out of the thick of it. But man, it has nothing to say about my eternity, so it is ultimately powerless beyond this life. And I'm comfortable with that, because the reward is so much greater than anything else that could be offered. So having a settled mind about us, brothers and sisters, is hugely important, and I hope that that's ministering to your heart as we look at these things, and realizing that our eternity is a secured matter, and we can have complete confidence and trust in that. So we will pick up at Matthew next week as we get through chapter 17, and remembering, as Jesus had said, our hope is not in the things of this world. We wouldn't exchange what God has given to us freely by that gift of eternal life in the person of Jesus for anything that this world offers to us. And I pray that that offers you real hope. So we'll see you hopefully here for the study next week.